start my speech in three, two, one. This house would prioritize. This house would prioritize digital literacy education
students
over traditional drama and sports in secondary schools. So I think it's important to understand what this digital literacy looks like. We think this is the basic abilities or basic skills that human beings require to navigate online platforms or social media as a whole. We also think why we need to understand the importance as to why this particular debate is framed in the context of secondary school. We think these are individuals who are most likely going to jump on the internet, not necessarily to go with a bandwagon, but necessarily to create a particular change that they require. What that means is that students are most likely able to manipulate online platforms to do exactly what they require them to do. It's not like, for example, where adults most likely jump on to stay like probably well informed as what is happening in the society. We think these particular children are more enticed to change what is happening or use it for their own particular suit so that it can benefit them at the end of the day. We also think it's important to understand what type of society we live in as today. We think this is a largely globalized world that has jumped on the train of social media. It means that online platforms and things of the sort are reason as to why globalization is most likely to happen. But also too, we think that is the reason as to why networking is most likely happening within the societies we live in. We think that is very important for the particular students that are in high school right now. Where that is important is because you understand and notice that particularly how they're able to communicate with one another, probably with people from outside or inside within their communities, it is largely through digital platforms. Chair, you also think it's important to understand the particular nature of this traditional sports and drama. We think these are largely competitive spaces, but they have specific problems. One is a problem of lack of engagement. What that means that platforms to engage in these particular sports is probably more likely less compared to the number of people who are wannabes in those particular places. But also too, competition is largely there because these particular individuals feel like they need to execute their skill or talents at the end of the day. But what happens is that at a point in time where you don't have digital literacy prioritized, it means you most likely limit their engagement with other people, or you most likely limit their connection with these other people.
You are a speaker.
Not taken. What is important for you to understand what this prioritization looks like, it means that the government is able to fund particularly high schools to make sure that digital literacy is something that is advocated for. We don't mean to the extent that the economy is strained, but we think to the extent that every school or every student is able to have some sort of access, we think we are able to achieve some sort of change. But also too, we think that incorporating certain ICT labs within particular schools or necessarily having access to some sort of digital literacy is important in these schools. But also too, we think, three, engaging them in academic programs, we think is also important. That means the syllabus should have some sort of cooperation for these particular things. That is the reason as to why we think prioritizing it is very important. What it looks like is that even when I am somebody who's talented at sports or something of the sort of drama, I am able to connect with the particular people outside of just my fraternity to get the experience and gain some sort of influence or some sort of connection with people who are most likely going to be important to my particular suit. At a point in time where it's the reverse, it means you most likely have a lot of people within these particular spaces that don't have the particular engagement that they require. That's why we think prioritization of this particular digital literacy then becomes crucial to these individuals. We think you most likely lose out if you don't prioritize digital literacy. Thank you.
Is this audible? Just a second. Okay, so my speech will start. Ready? Okay. Please feel free to open your eyes. I might respond to one or two. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Panel, notice that in a world where employers, right, score teamwork higher than technical skills, right, we think it becomes quite vital to strike the balance between digital literacy, right, and individual abilities to associate with the people that they exist within an environment, right? We think something that is really important important on side opposition is to understand that we live in a world that at least has some level of like digital literacy, right? It means then when you have like that sort of like prioritization, you directly marginalize. That takes us to our first stance in terms of framing, right? We think the idea and implication of prioritization, it is something that we contest aside opposition. We do not at any one point demean the idea and the importance of digital literacy, but we say to the point at which you prioritize it, right, over things like traditional drama and sports, you directly marginalize, you kill the creative industry, you kind of like you like disarm the individuals that benefit from these specific things. It is bad to that extent because you have individuals who resent you as government that passes on these particular things. We say from side opposition, why it is important then. Look at the nature of prioritization, right? It looks like you have like more monetary prioritization, right? If at all there's money that comes, you probably allocate more money to buying computers than buying bonds, right? We think the implication that has, right, is that the school or government is shifting value, right, towards things, for say for instance, digital literacy. We see, and as opposition, we acknowledge that currently government has put like at least that effort, right? You have like, charity organizations try to do those particular initiatives of giving computers to schools, right? But it means then, when government shifts value that it attaches to things like traditional drama and sports, even students will shift the value. What happens then? The teachers that teach drama and sports, right, they'll most likely lose their jobs because even the students who would be attending these particular things, they notice that there's a government shift in terms of value. Look at the idea of science teachers and arts teachers, right? You have like government right now currently give more salary towards like science teachers, right? The implication that has, right now when you go to those schools, right, you particularly have like those science classes full, and then you have like two people studying the arts classes. The implication that has is that you most likely lose out on the creative industry. It is bad because you disarm the individuals that directly contribute to your revenue. We think then there must be some balance in terms of like the illustration of these two ideas. As opposition, we say digital literacy is important, right? That necessitates the idea of striking a balance between these two existent things. We think on our side, right, you do not have creative thinking or probably critical thinking and teamwork abilities that these individuals could get from things like traditional drama, right? There has to be a significant balance in terms of having a human-based development, right? Because we don't want at any one point in time. We think even if you're too much digital literate, right, you cannot probably supersede things like AI or robots are doing these particular things, right? It means then, if the level of validation and criteria for society to validate an individual in terms of things like employment is tech skills, right? It means then an AI is better. It means instead of employing you, we can employ an AI. But we think what can keep you even at the point when you have like complete automation is when you have those abilities of teamwork, right? Is when you have the active ability to kind of like contribute to those particular industries. It becomes quite important that we arm these individuals within those specific regards. We think then the last thing is on the nature of this traditional drama and sports, right? Notice that it helps individuals build more physical and realistic relationships, right? The premise of this argument is based on the idea that you're able to build more physical interactions, especially when you have like that significant promotion. We say from side opposition, it is important for you to strike a balance between these two things.
Alright, so I'll begin my speech. On the count of 3, 2, 1. Nacha, I think that in this particular debate, it is important for us to understand that we live in a world that is rapidly evolving. That is, in a world where technological advancements are rapidly increasing to the extent that at a point in time, human beings are necessarily not going to be needed in things like the employment sector. At a point in time where we have things like AI being able to do what human beings have been doing in the long run. We also need to understand that children are likely to create him, and that necessarily means that if a child is probably interested in drama and sports, they're most likely to manipulate digital literacy to be able to use it to improve in drama and sports, and that's much more likely going to make them better. I think that we need to understand is that whatever they bring on their side of the house is mutually exclusive. That means that it probably exists in our side of the house, and we achieve it more. One, and tell us that employers prioritize teamwork over things like digital literacy. In a world where we have the need for people decreasing, in employment sector, in a world where we have things like AI mechanisms arising and being able to do all sorts of employment, it certainly means that things like digital literacy should be prioritized instead of what they give us. We also need to understand that this debate is going to run on the magnitude of urgency. That is, the fact that we have the use of digital technology rapidly increasing, it then necessarily means that it is urgent for us to address this issue. The fact that we have 41% of children already exposed, and that necessarily means that since these children are already exposed, they need to learn mechanisms that are going to help them to learn how to use them. We need to understand that digital literacy is not necessarily how to use that skill, but it's also learning the magnitude, the impact. It's necessarily knowing the ethical and moral implications of using the internet. I think that we need to understand is that currently 87% of jobs require digital skills. That necessarily means that we need to prioritize these digital skills. We still need to understand what the prioritization looks like. So I need to re-echo this. We are not doing with drama and sports. We still have drama and sports currently existing in South Africa, but the fact that we need to understand that in schools, the first priority is obviously education, and then we are going to have digital literacy coming in, and then we are going to probably have drama and sports. We need to understand that for excellence in drama and sports, we are probably going to need we're going to probably need the use of digital technology. At a point in time whereby I'm going to be able to use digital technology to learn to become better, then it necessarily means that whatever they present on their side of the house is mutually exclusive. I will probably achieve it better. I think that they talk about is we're going to demean drama and sports, which we clearly say that it's not going to happen because basically everything that they talk about is mutually exclusive. I think that we need to understand in this particular debate is that digital literacy is not basically going to be, secluded, or it's not going to basically be limited to learning how to use a computer or stuff of that sort. We still tell you that we're going to advance in a way that we're going to be able to learn the more implications, and we need to understand that today, technology has a lot of negative implications. And that necessarily means that we need to learn these implications and how to do with them, which we are going to probably achieve by the use of digital literacy. I think we need to understand that these children need to be able to learn digital literacy in preparation for the future. As I told you earlier, that the world is going very much digital, and that necessarily means that these children also need to get digital and be able
to set us for that is already in place. We are giving you a word that is striking a balance between the traditional drama sports and then the digital literacy. Why? Because currently, even the new curriculum that we have, it has already incorporated ICT, and then the time allocated to ICT already is, now is already enough. The agency that team proposition is talking about, we want to build a person that is whole-rounded, that they can engage in the digital skills, and then they can go to the teamwork. Now, you cannot Google teamwork. Fun. You can never go on a computer and then you Google out something like, how do you do teamwork? Now, why are we talking about striking a balance in the traditional drama? Why? What is traditional drama and sports? How are they hoping to build a person that is whole-rounded? Now, these are the things that are going to nurture up, that is having the confidence, that is having the teamwork, that is having the creativity, that is having the physical.
We think that then necessarily creating this parallelism does not practically create the unemployment team opposition urges in this debate. They believe that drama teachers are going to be left unemployed. But panel, how does that happen? We are prioritizing, not eliminating traditional drama and sports. That means that these people still remain employed at the end of the day. That is unrealistic on their side of the house. But then we also think that digital literacy actually provides better opportunities for teamwork. Now notice that traditional drama and sports give you an opportunity to build teamwork and, teamwork with people that you actually physically interact with. What digital platforms do and what digital literacy does is empowers you to interact with people and build teamwork with people beyond the physical borders of your physical boundaries. You get that, and that is something that team opposition does not realize. So we believe that teamwork can be built during digital literacy. You see their failure to even acknowledge that still shows you the need that they also need to acquire a certain form of digital literacy they haven't yet understood. That means that it's really necessary at this point. And then we also believe that again, like I said before, that it's important for there to be a prioritization because one of these is more important than the other. And as Team Affirmative, we are proud to propose that. Thank you.
Okay, I want to confirm audibility. Sure. So my speech would start in the count of C, B, and A. Something very important to understand is that individuals are driven by things like incentives and things like values attached to particular ideas. What that necessarily means, if you prioritize something at the end of the day, you attach more value to that particular idea. What that necessarily means is that individuals are going to shift from what they've been doing and start focus on that particular idea that you attach value most to. What that necessarily contributes to this particular debate is to say, if what we prioritize digital literacy education, that means most individuals, even teachers, are more likely going to shift and go for maybe training in these particular spheres because they think that's where that those are the areas that are attached to value too. That's to why you definitely see that we are more likely going to have clashes, and that's the same thing that is happening to arts and science. I don't want to go into those elaborations because they've been made by my previous speakers. Notice, Chair, that at the end of the day, what team proposition entirely urges as a priority will show you that when you prioritize something, you directly marginalize the other. What that necessarily means, in the globalized what they are talking about, we are more likely going to have individuals that think that they should employ maybe robots at the end of the day. I think the only reason as to why an individual or a person should be employed is because of the exclusive skills they have. The exclusive skills we tell them to say, these are things like confidence, teamwork, creativity, like creative minds, and tell you the public speaking skills that at the end of the day you gain. I think the interaction you have on our side when we strike a balance, see, I think we have a symmetrical kind of benefits on their side, but what makes our side exclusive is that we are able to strike a balance, see, and make things fair. We don't necessarily marginalize any of the groups, right? We don't marginalize any of the sides, but we rather strike a balance to see that we actually cater for all sides. On those particular grounds, we are able to solve the problems they want. At the end of the day, we are also able to actually ensure things like job security on our side. When we talk about things like agents, I don't think they're able to prove to us the problems that are within status quo. They don't show us that we have any kind of problem that exists within this particular regards, that their kind of an argument or maybe their kind of case is going to solve. The only major thing they assume here is a globalized world that looks at maybe things like technological advancement. I think, Chair, even if you have a skill and you're employed in my company, at the end of the day, because of, maybe after spending 2 months and you're unable to have the teamwork with my people or with the people I'm employing, I'm going to fire you even when you have the skill in technological advancement. What then guarantees you to stay in my company is when you're able to associate with these individuals. Notice that is excluded on their side because the value is already shifted and individuals are not able to like go into those particular kind of regards. I think, Chair, still, we tell you on our side that we are more likely going to actually create a balance, and we are going to create a reason as to what individuals should actually serve for all things. Notice, Chair, if I take it back, individuals value the old like arts and sciences because they had the same value attached to them. That's why in the recent times we had students go to all sides. But now we have already a shift and people are going around into sciences because they think that's where value is attached. With that, I rest.
The most important thing that we thought was largely outstanding in the debate is firstly on motion analysis. So strategically, I think it's very important for teams not just to analyze what specific motions are and what the frames are. I think you need to strategically be able to tie your case to those specific things. I think it's very important that you then creates more coherence with your case, but secondly, it makes the case far more clear on your side. The second thing I'm going to talk about motion analysis is basically appreciating the motion as it presents itself. So it's beyond what you most likely think, but there is a reason why motions are worded in a specific way, right? So you need to appreciate the way the motion presents itself to you, so that you can be able to appreciate it back in the sense that your casing is more in line with what the specific motion is. So the idea is you don't just pick it apart and then present it. You pick it apart and put it back together. So if you after picking it apart and putting it back together, does it still make sense to you if you present it as a whole? That's very important in your casing, and your casing would go a bit far if in line with basically creating your casing. So analyzing motions is beyond what motion types are. It's also beyond what specific moving parts. So the key words that influence the cases are what we call moving parts. So what are the moving parts in the debate, and how do those moving parts affect the debate? I think it's very important when you're analyzing those moving parts. Second part of my OA is going to be on the idea of mechanization. I think this was lacking on both ends. I think it's not enough to just justify the claim and impact it. The claim is more persuasive if you are able to take your time to explain what you're saying is true. So if it's a bad thing, explain why it's bad. If you say something happens, explain how it happens, right? It's very important. Not just by illustration, but by raw explanation. It makes the argument more persuasive. Examples just justify what you've explained. If you don't explain it, it's just basically not very quantitative or qualitative at best. So I think it's very important. This is not just for mechanization or explaining why arguments are true. It applies for impacts as well. So if X happens, explain how you get to that point. How do we get there, right? So if you can explain that there is, dependency, right? And you mechanize how dependency happens, explain why dependency is a bad thing and how it affects people. Explain how we get to that point. And I think it's very important in mechanization. It's very important for contribution. Lastly, relevance to the motion. Your case will matter, but if you can't link it back to the motion, we are very unclear how that would help you. So always linking it back to the motion and relevance. How is what you're saying relevant to the motion? Is the actor relevant to the motion? Is the community relevant to the motion? It's very important that you always make the specific distinctions. It makes your case more clear, but also more persuasive in that particular regard. The next thing I want to talk about here is engagement, right? So the idea is basically two things. One is that your case already exists as solid as it is. When responses are made to your case, it means your case is less valuable than it already was in the debate. So it's beyond just bringing back the case. It's about, first of all, de-establishing the responses that have been already made to your case. So if I respond to your case, it's less valuable now. For your case to retain the value it has, it's not just about bringing back the case as it was prior, it's about also engaging the responses that have been made to your case. Are we together? Yeah? Very key, very important in that particular regard. This is for both ends. I think both teams that need to work better on this as well. So engagement is beyond just flagging the response. You ought to also not just flag responses to the other team. You also have to engage the responses that have already been made on your case. It's very important in of itself in comparatives, in weighing, right? So also lastly is basically on the comparative. It's not like debate is an actively comparative sport all through. You always have to show why you're better at every stage of the debate. So if you fail to do that, it becomes very important for engagement to become solid. You leave it to us to now have to determine what makes more sense. So you ultimately have to always highlight those things that you are winning at, and those things are always evident in the debate, not just with speeches, but at all stages. Show what you're winning on. Engagement becomes very crucial at that particular point. Let's move on to the debate. I'm actually doing that as I'm confirming ballots in a real bit. Okay. So there is a certain point at the end, which I don't get how we tell the relation to certain ballot now. So that's general feedback for me. I think contribution-wise, you could do far better. Engagement, you can do far better, right? Emotional analysis, the same. Oh, final balance in. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. I just need to make sure that your draws are. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Submitted. Okay, so here's another thing that I'm going to talk about then